Rings of power. Rings of power. Well, where do we begin? All the information that's been coming out so far is clearly saying that we're not going to be seeing, or for those that have already seen it, we've not seen something that sticks to the lore that Tolkien created. Now, I've not yet seen the Rings of Power. I'm going to be watching it very soon, so I'll do a response after that. But it's... I thought it'd be good to at least talk about the lore aspect of things, because the lore is really important. The lore is what creates the world. The lore is what makes Tolkien's work worth watching. The lore is the thing that grabs you in, and the consistency of the characters is what then means you're hooked into the story. You're invested in the characters of the story because they are doing the things that they are doing and they are acting the way they are doing. And so for things to not be accurate to what Tolkien created is the biggest faux pas for any Tolkien fan. So what is it that we're supposed to be seeing? Well, the first thing we have to be very clear on is what the Rings of Power has. It does not have the rights to The Lord of the Rings. It does not have the rights to the Silmarillion. It does not have the rights to The Hobbit. What it does have the rights to is the appendices. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, the first time of reading anything to do with anything other than the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit aspect of Tolkien's Middle-earth creation was reading the appendices after I'd finished reading Lord of the Rings for the first time. Now, having since also read the Silmarillion, it's very interesting to see what is in there and what content we have that they're able to work with. The first thing to be clear on is it gives a very basic outline of what the history of Middle-earth is like. It's not as detailed as you see with the Silmarillion, or indeed with the books that have later been edited by Christopher Tolkien to bring all of the writings that his father had for things like the story of Turin or of Beren and Luthien or the fall of Gondolin. All of those stories have more detail than the Silmarillion, and the Silmarillion has more detail than the appendices for the Lord of the Rings. But there's still a fair amount in there. You get a lot of the basic outline of what happens in the Second Age with Númenor, with the fall of Númenor and the Dunedain, who have gone from being the Edain in the First Age. They're given the gift of Númenor to go and live there with an extended life period, and you get some names in there, and you also get a decent understanding of what's gone on beforehand as well, though, as I said, not in the same detail as the Silmarillion gives. So you could potentially see an argument from the creators of the Rings of Power to say, well, we've got very vague information based on the material that we're using, so we've got room for creative license. Now, the problem is that that'd be fine if we only had the Lord of the Rings appendices, but we very clearly have more than just that. We have the Silmarillion, and even though they can't base things on the Silmarillion, they shouldn't be able to get away with creating stuff that clearly goes against what the Silmarillion tells us. When we see the Silmarillion, we see a story which tells us about the origins of the elves, the origins of the dwarves, the origins of humans. Well, two different origins there. And we also have the origins of the hobbits mentioned within all of this as well, because the Silmarillion doesn't just do the First and the Second Age, it also does an abbreviated version of the Third Age as well, including the era of the War of the Ring. Now, within all of that, there's some very key things that we see. We see the number 3 turning up a lot. So the elves, there are 3 houses of elves. The 3 houses are the House of Finwë, the House of Ingwë, and the House of Elwë, who's later known as Thingol. And Within those three houses, we have some very clear descriptions of what these elves look like. There's differences in hair colour, but they're all given descriptions of the differences between them, and we're told that there's three. We're also told about the houses of the Edain, the first men to come into Beleriand, which is the land that falls at the end of the first age, so we don't see it in the second age. So it will only be mentioned in harkening back to things that have led them to where they are, if they're going to use it at all in the Rings of Power. And we have the three houses. We have the Haladin, we have the House of Beor, and we have the House of, if I'm remembering it rightly, because I'm not referencing information straight to hand right now, the House of Hador. So the Haladin, the House of Hador, and the House of Beor, the three houses. Now, this doesn't directly link into what I'm about to point to, but with the pattern that we have, Tolkien then goes and breaks it a little. We have the seven houses of the dwarves, and we have the seven halls that they're in. So Moria or Khazad-dûm, it's got all of its details that we know from Lord of the Rings and so on. But there are seven other houses, including two that we're not too sure whether one or both fell in the first stage, Belagost and Novgorod. Novgorod. I'm mixing up with Russia now. But on top of all of that, we then have the hobbits. Now, something that needs to be very clear here is that the creators of the Rings of Power have said that there are no hobbits because they don't have the rights to it. Now, the hobbits have three branches, three houses themselves, and when they come over, and they come over in the Third Age, when they come into the Western lands that we know from the stories in Tolkien's writings, it's the Third Age, not the Second Age. But we have the Stores, we have one other house I can't remember the name of offhand, and we have the Fallowhides. And I think I'm right in saying it's the one that I can't remember the name offhand is the one that they've decided to use for Lord of the Rings. But either way, they've chosen one of the three houses of the hobbits. They've not chosen to say hobbits, but they're using this house. But they are still using hobbits. Harfoots, that's it. So they're using the Harfoots. It's the Harfoots, the Fallowhides, and the Stores. Harfoots are hobbits. There is no getting around this. This is very clear in Tolkien's writings. So immediately, alarm bells should be ringing for anyone who's a fan of Tolkien, because this is not Tolkien writing. This is them playing very fast and very, very loose with the details that Tolkien has provided them within his writings. So that's the first issue. The second issue is one which we're seeing a lot now, which is the identity politics element, which I'm sure you could see many, many videos highlighting all of these issues. So I won't go into too much detail, but to be a point within this, Lenny Henry is potentially, you could class him as a British treasure. He's someone who he came through in the certainly in the 80s, TV wise, he was very big in the 80s into the 90s. He was also one of the key figures behind the founding of Comic Relief, which has done so much to help poverty in Africa and also with children and young people in our own country of Britain as well, and around the world. So he is, I would say, a national treasure. But he doesn't belong in Rings of Power as a hobbit. He's not a hobbit, which is what Harfoots are. The reason why? It's because the only description we have that comes anywhere close to his appearance is basically saying that one particular group of hobbits, I believe the Harfoots, are said to be slightly darker in complexion. That's not they have dark skin, that is, they are slightly darker in complexion. And what this means is that we've got people playing fast and loose with appearances now. Now, you might say, hang on a minute, isn't that a bit racist? Surely anyone can play a hobbit. We're open to everyone now. Well, no, the problem is Tolkien created a world in which he was telling a crafted mythology of his own making for Europe, specifically for Anglo-Saxon Europe. So if you have a look, yes, there are some characters who are not white, but they come from south. They are, you start to see it a bit with the Haradrim, and a little bit to do with the very far eastern people from Rhûn, but it's not what Tolkien was creating when he created the elves and created the Edain, who would be the Dunedain, so the Edain, who would be the Dunedain, and indeed the later men, the Easterlings of the First Age, who were described as being very dark in complexion, so dark hair but pale skin. All of the different races that Tolkien is talking about are light-skinned, and that's because he's writing it for a race of people who he believes has lost their natural mythology. They've lost the mythology of their history through the fact that Christianity comes in and it takes over, and so he's creating this new mythology, and therefore he's creating it specifically for a group of people. The equivalent I can think of would be if we were to have a look at, I don't know, take creating a mythology, or indeed just taking a mythology that's already there from a country in Africa, and saying, well, okay, let's start putting some white people in there. It's not what it was created for. You're telling a story for a particular racial group, and that's the way that Tolkien created it. So this is how it's supposed to be. And so when we see black hobbits, that's going against the very creation that Tolkien created. When we see black elves, which there is a black elf, a black dwarf, dwarves being the creatures that stay underground for so long, not exactly a place where you would expect to find someone naturally developing a higher count of melanin in their skin, because they're not in the sunlight. All of these races that Tolkien creates, they are all white because they are in relation to the Anglo-Saxon race that he is writing for. And it's not about being racist, it's about being true to what is being written. It's not about saying black people can't be in this because of what they look like. It's not what it's about. It's black people aren't in this because it's not for the characters that are created are not made in that way. They are very clearly and distinctly made for the Anglo-Saxon appearance. So you have the Noldor, pale skin, and certainly with Feanor, with dark hair. You have pale skin and blonde hair. For I believe that's both for the Vanyar and the Sindar, I believe. I don't quote me on this if I'm getting it wrong. Apologies, but certainly you have a very clear line of how they are described, and it's all peoples with fair skin. So playing fast and loose because you want to bring hobbits in, because you want them to be... No, that's not the story that you should be telling, because they're not in the story. using people with non-white skin colour to be portraying characters in a mythos which is clearly all about characters which are fair-skinned, you should not be should be bringing that in either, because that's not the story that's being told. If you want to tell a story which has dark-skinned elves and dwarves and all the rest of it, I'm sure there are stories out there that have that, and if not, well, how about going and making your own then? I mean, this could very easily be something that if you didn't have the Lord of the Rings kind of label to it, it could still be potentially a decent story. But because they've got it under the Lord of the Rings banner, that means you're supposed to be playing with the details that are already there, that are already in place. And that means that you need to be sticking to what is true to the story. So I won't go on any further. It's been just over 15 minutes of me rambling now, and I'm hoping that maybe I'll be wrong, though from the reviews I've already heard, it's not looking good. I think one other thing, just to also bear in mind, Tolkien was very clear in what he said about how he wanted the details of the story that he told to be treated. He did make a comment about people adding things on, but he was also very clear in what he said after that, which was basically saying, no, don't do that. He was also very clear in what he laid out. I mean, if ever there was someone who was meticulous in the details that he described the peoples of, it's Tolkien. His is a very different style of writing, and he has so much detail within there. So if you're going to do something using his materials, at the very least, you should be looking to stick to what it is that he created. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I will be back a bit later, and I will give a review based on what I've seen. I don't hold out much hope, but you never know. So feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to do whatever you want to do in response to this video. Thumbs up or not, comment or not. It'd be great if you did. Yeah. We'll leave it there, and I will see you in the next video.